It was another regular morning in Silicon Valley, the kind where the sun shone bright and the air smelled of fresh opportunity. The streets were busy, filled with people rushing to their offices, to meetings, to power lunches. The hustle and bustle of the tech world was everywhere, and yet, there was someone among them who was invisible. Someone who was just another part of the scenery, unnoticed by those rushing around. Jordan Hayes, a delivery boy, made his way through the busy streets, his uniform slightly faded and his shoes scuffed from years of use. He walked with a purpose, his head down as he focused on his next stop. To everyone around him, he was just a worker, a man who carried packages, dropped them off, and disappeared. There was nothing special about him, at least not in the eyes of the high-powered people that dominated this area. Jordan had learned early on that people didn't notice delivery boys. They didn't notice the ones who worked behind the scenes, the ones who delivered packages and made sure things ran smoothly. No, the world only cared about the people who made the decisions, the ones who ran the companies, the ones who were on the top. And Jordan? He was far from the top. He was at the bottom. But that day today was different. Today, Jordan would cross paths with someone who would change his life forever. It was a person who was known by everyone, someone whose name was heard around the world. Elon Musk. Jordan had heard the name. Who hadn't? Elon Musk was the billionaire founder of Tesla, the genius behind SpaceX, a man whose ambitions reached as high as the stars themselves. He was everywhere on the news, in interviews, and even on social media. His name was associated with innovation, technology, and power. And yet, Jordan was just another delivery boy. The kind of person that people like Elon Musk never noticed. Or so he thought. As Jordan walked down the street, carrying his next delivery, he had no idea that his life was about to change. The usual crowd of busy, important people surrounded him, their faces lost in their phones or conversations. They didn't give him a second glance. And Jordan didn't mind. He was used to it. He had always been used to being ignored. But today, things were about to be different. Jordan had always kept to himself. He didn't have many friends, and he didn't mind. Being invisible had its perks. It meant he could observe without being observed. He could watch the world go by without anyone noticing he was there. And in a city like Silicon Valley, where everyone was trying to climb to the top, it was easy to blend in. No one noticed the delivery boy. He was just one of many. But beneath the surface, there was more to Jordan than anyone could guess. He wasn't just a delivery boy. He wasn't just someone who carried packages. He had dreams. Big dreams. Dreams that no one knew about. Dreams of being someone important, of making a difference. He just needed the right opportunity. And he had been waiting for that opportunity his entire life. As Jordan made his way down the street, he could feel the tension in the air. There was something about today that felt different. It wasn't just the bright sun or the busy crowds. It was something more. Something he couldn't explain. The world around him seemed to be moving faster than usual, and Jordan couldn't help but feel like he was caught in the middle of something. Maybe it was just his imagination, or maybe it was something bigger. But no matter what, he kept walking, his eyes focused on the next address, the next delivery. He passed the usual buildings, the glass towers that housed the big tech companies, the ones where all the important meetings took place. These were the places where the world's brightest minds worked, where people like Elon Musk made decisions that changed the world. Jordan had always admired those people from afar. He had heard the stories about their success, their visions, and their ability to change the course of history. He had always wondered what it would be like to be a part of that world. What would it feel like to be seen, to be heard? To be a part of something bigger than yourself? Jordan didn't know the answer to that question, but he did know one thing: he wasn't part of that world. Not yet, anyway. As he turned the corner, the familiar sound of his footsteps echoed in the quiet streets. But just as he was about to step onto the sidewalk, he froze. A car approached, and not just any car. It was sleek, black, and powerful, a Tesla. And behind the wheel, Jordan could see the unmistakable figure of Elon Musk himself. Jordan's heart skipped a beat. He had seen Elon Musk on TV, in interviews, on the news. But seeing him in person? That was something else entirely. The man who had made headlines for his revolutionary work in space travel, electric cars, and artificial intelligence was right there in front of him. Jordan could hardly believe it. The car slowed as it approached, and for a moment, everything seemed to stop. Time seemed to stand still as Jordan and Elon locked eyes. It was only for a split second, but it felt like an eternity. Jordan wasn't sure what to make of it. Was this just a coincidence? Or was something bigger at play? As the car passed, Jordan felt a strange sense of excitement. But it wasn't just because he had seen Elon Musk in person. It was because he realized something. He realized that today, of all days, he had crossed paths with someone who could change everything for him. Someone who had the power to make him visible in a way he had never been before. Jordan didn't know how or why, but he knew that this was the start of something. Something big. And as he continued on his delivery route, he couldn't shake the feeling that today would be the day his life changed forever. The world around him continued to rush by. People continued to go about their business, unaware of the silent promise that had just been made. But Jordan knew. He could feel it in the air. He was about to find out what it truly meant to be seen. And just like that, the energy shifted. The streets of Silicon Valley, once cold and indifferent, suddenly seemed full of possibility. The invisible delivery boy had crossed paths with one of the most influential people on the planet. And now, nothing would be the same. Jordan had been working for the delivery company for several months now. The routine was always the same. He woke up early, threw on his worn uniform, and set out to deliver packages all over Silicon Valley. Day after day, his life seemed to be stuck in the same loop. He made the same deliveries to the same places, saw the same people, and got the same cold looks. It was all so familiar that it had become second nature to him. He didn't mind the work itself. Delivering packages wasn't the hardest job in the world. It was the people, the ones who didn't see him, the ones who treated him like he was invisible. The higher UPS, the business people, the ones with the fancy suits and important meetings, they all ignored him. They didn't care about the delivery boys. To them, Jordan was just a face in the crowd, a small part of the machine that kept the wheels of the big companies turning. At first, Jordan had tried to make himself noticeable. He'd smile at people, try to be polite, even start small conversations with the ones who looked at him like he was nothing more than a delivery boy. But after a while, he stopped. It was clear that most people didn't care. He was just another worker, another cog in the wheel. The world didn't have time for someone like him. Jordan had accepted it. He had learned to keep his head down and do his job. He was used to being ignored. But there were days, like today, when it still hurt. When the silence of being unseen felt heavier than it usually did. Today, he was carrying a heavy load of packages, walking through the streets of Silicon Valley, passing by expensive buildings and fancy cars. Everywhere he looked, there were people who didn't even glance at him. They were too busy with their own lives, too caught up in their own success. What really stung was how they acted as if he didn't even exist. He could see them in their shiny cars, their heads turned away as they passed by him. He could hear the sound of their laughter, their conversations, their lives moving forward while he stood still, stuck in the same place. It was a reminder of where he was. A reminder that no one cared about the delivery boy. They only cared about the people in the expensive cars, the ones with the power and the money. The ones who were important. And then, it happened. Jordan was walking to his next delivery when he saw Greg Thompson, one of the tech moguls who owned a few companies in Silicon Valley. Greg had made a name for himself by building a successful business, and his face was known in every corner of the city. He was a rich, powerful man who walked with a sense of importance. Greg's car pulled up beside Jordan as he tried to navigate through the busy street. The car slowed down for a moment, and that was when it happened. Greg looked out the window, his eyes falling on Jordan, and then, without a second thought, he sneered. "Get out of the way, kid," Greg said, his voice cold. "You're lucky I'm in a hurry." Jordan felt his heart race. He had been trying to get through the crowded street, and as he reached out to deliver the package, he stumbled slightly, just as Greg's car stopped beside him. It was a mistake, a small one, but it was enough. Enough for Greg to make a judgment, enough for him to show just how little he thought of someone like Jordan. For a moment, Jordan stood there, stunned. He wasn't sure what to say. The words were stuck in his throat. He had heard people speak to him like this before, but Greg's words hit harder than the others. Maybe it was because Greg was someone important, someone who had built his empire from the ground up. Maybe it was because he felt the sting of being dismissed by someone who had all the power in the world. Jordan swallowed the sting of Greg's words, trying to keep his face neutral. He didn't want to show how much they had affected him. He didn't want to give Greg the satisfaction of seeing him hurt. But inside, something was starting to grow. Something deep within him, a feeling he couldn't shake. It was anger. Jordan had always been quiet, always kept to himself. He didn't like confrontation, and he didn't like causing trouble. But this time was different. This time, the words stung in a way that made him want to fight back. He had every right to stand up for himself, to tell Greg that he wasn't just some kid to be pushed around. He wasn't just a delivery boy. But how could he? How could he stand up to someone like Greg Thompson, someone who had the power and the money to crush him with a single word? Jordan's hands clenched into fists. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He had learned over the years that getting upset wouldn't solve anything. But that didn't mean it was easy to let things go. It didn't mean it didn't hurt when someone looked down on you like you were nothing. As Greg's car sped away, Jordan stood there for a moment, feeling the anger boil inside him. The world around him seemed so unfair. Here he was, just trying to do his job, trying to survive in a world that didn't seem to care. And then there were people like Greg Thompson, who lived in a world of luxury and power, a world where they didn't have to worry about anything. Jordan wanted to yell. He wanted to scream. But all he could do was stand there, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew he had no power, no way to fight back. He was just a delivery boy, after all. Just another face in the crowd. But deep inside, something was changing. That anger, that feeling of being overlooked, began to turn into something else. Something stronger. Jordan had been pushed around for too long. He had been ignored, dismissed, and treated like he didn't matter. But he did matter. He had a right to stand up for himself. He had a right to be seen. And one day, he would make sure that people saw him for who he truly was. Jordan didn't know when or how it would happen, but he could feel it deep inside. Something was about to shift. He wouldn't stay invisible forever. As the sun began to set over the valley, Jordan finished his deliveries and started walking home. The anger still burned inside him, but now it felt different. Now it was a fire that he could control. Now it was something that would push him forward. Maybe, just maybe, one day, he would be the one in charge. One day, he would show people that he wasn't just a delivery boy. He was someone with purpose. Someone who had the strength to stand up for himself and make a difference. The days passed in a blur. Jordan kept to his routine, delivering package after package, each one as ordinary as the last. Yet, Something had changed inside him. It wasn't just about carrying boxes anymore. It wasn't just about getting from one place to another, dropping off a delivery, and moving on. No, it was different now. Jordan was beginning to see things differently. He had always been quiet, always kept to himself, but the events of the past few days had planted a seed in his mind. The anger from his encounter with Greg Thompson still burned, but now it was mixed with something else. Curiosity. A desire to understand why things were the way they were. Why were some people treated like royalty while others, like him, were left to do the dirty work? Why did people like Greg look down on him as if he was beneath them? Every day, as Jordan made his deliveries, he couldn't help but notice more and more. He began to pay attention to the small things, the subtle signs of power and control that were hidden in plain sight. The way some of the CEOs strutted around with a sense of entitlement, the way they acted as if the world revolved around them, while their employees worked long hours in silence, barely noticed. The way money seemed to flow in endless streams, but somehow, it never reached the people who actually made things happen, the ones on the ground, like Jordan. He had always known that the world wasn't fair. He had always known that there were people who had everything, and people who had nothing. But now, it seemed like the unfairness was everywhere, as if it was built into the very system that governed the world. It wasn't just the big CEOs who made him feel small, it was the whole system, the way power worked, the way people were used, the way everyone seemed to be treated based on what they could offer. And Jordan? He had nothing to offer. At least, that's how it felt. But now, as he watched the world around him with a new sense of awareness, he started to see the cracks in the system. He noticed how some of the tech giants, the ones who were supposed to be innovators, acted as though they could do no wrong. They walked around with smug smiles, confident that their money and power protected them from any real consequences. They treated their teams like they were disposable, pushing them to work harder and longer, but never giving them the respect they deserved. And all the while, their employees kept their heads down, never daring to question the system. The more Jordan saw, the more he understood. He understood that it wasn't just about money. It was about power. It was about control. It was about people who thought they were untouchable, who believed that the rules didn't apply to them. But Jordan was starting to realize something else, too. He was starting to see that maybe, just maybe, the rules didn't have to apply to him either. Jordan had always thought he was small. He had always thought he was invisible. But what if he wasn't? What if he could be more than just a delivery boy? What if he could be the one who made a change? The thought filled him with a strange sense of possibility, a feeling he had never allowed himself to have before. As he continued his deliveries, these thoughts began to grow. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this life than what he had known. More than just delivering packages, more than just being invisible. Maybe he was meant for something else. Maybe he was meant to see the world for what it really was and do something about it. One day, Jordan's routine took him to a new destination, SpaceX headquarters. It was a place he had only ever heard of in the news. The name SpaceX was known around the world, associated with space exploration, rockets, and cutting-edge technology. To most people, the headquarters was a symbol of innovation, of the future. But to Jordan, it was just another stop on his delivery route. Or so he thought. The moment Jordan stepped onto the grounds of SpaceX, something felt different. The air seemed thicker, charged with the kind of energy that could only come from a place where history was being made. He walked quickly, trying to focus on his task, but his mind kept wandering. There was something about this place that made his heart race. Maybe it was the idea that he was standing in the heart of one of the most important companies in the world, a place where dreams of space travel and colonizing other planets were being turned into reality. Or maybe it was something else, something deeper. As he made his way across the grounds, his eyes wandered to the tall, sleek buildings that housed the company's offices and research centers. The place was massive, and everything about it screamed power and ambition. The kind of ambition that had made Elon Musk a household name. The kind of ambition that could change the world. Jordan was just about to turn a corner when he froze. His eyes locked onto a figure walking toward him. A tall man with a purposeful stride, a confident air about him. It was him. Elon Musk. The man who had shaped the future of technology, the man who had sent rockets to space and made electric cars a reality. The man who was known around the world for his bold ideas and visionary thinking. Jordan couldn't believe his eyes. He had seen Elon Musk on TV, read about him in magazines, and heard him speak about the future of space travel and technology. But seeing him in person? That was something else entirely. He was standing right there, just a few feet away. Jordan felt his heart skip a beat. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Jordan stood frozen, unable to look away. Elon Musk was walking toward him, and their eyes met for a split second. It was as if the world had shifted. Jordan's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just another delivery. This was a moment. A moment that would change everything. Elon didn't seem to notice Jordan. He walked right past him, his attention focused on something else, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that for a brief moment, Jordan had shared the same space as the most influential person in the world. And something inside Jordan stirred. He didn't know what it was. Maybe it was awe, maybe it was inspiration, but something deep within him clicked. In that fleeting moment, Jordan realized something. He was part of the world that Elon Musk had created. He was part of the system that Elon had built. And if he was part of it, maybe he had the power to change it. Maybe he didn't have to stay invisible. Maybe, just maybe, he could be seen. The thought was overwhelming. The idea that someone like him, just a delivery boy, could change anything seemed impossible. But then, Jordan remembered what he had seen. The way the powerful acted, the way they took everything for themselves, leaving nothing for those who worked the hardest. The way the world seemed to favor the few while ignoring the many. What if he could change that? What if he could stand up to them? What if he could be more than just another face in the crowd? He didn't have the answers yet, but the questions were there. And for the first time in a long time, Jordan felt something deep inside him. It wasn't just anger. It was a spark. A spark of hope, of determination, of change. And that spark was enough to drive him forward. It was the kind of day that seemed like any other. The sun shone brightly over Silicon Valley, casting long shadows across the streets as Jordan continued with his final delivery for the day. He had delivered countless packages before, but something felt different today. Maybe it was the weight of the moment, or maybe it was the exhaustion that had been quietly creeping up on him. Jordan had been pushing himself harder than usual. The past few weeks had been a blur of work, and he hadn't been able to slow down. The long hours, the grueling routes, and the constant pressure to move faster had worn him thin. He had been ignoring the signs that his body was asking for a break. But now, as he walked down the familiar street to complete his last delivery of the day, it felt like the ground was moving beneath him. He tried to steady himself, but his legs felt weak, unsteady. It was as if the world was spinning faster than he could keep up. His breath caught in his throat, and for a brief moment, his vision blurred. He tried to focus, to push through, but it was too late. With a sudden, jarring feeling, Jordan's body gave way. His legs crumpled beneath him, and he collapsed to the pavement with a heavy thud. The air was knocked out of him, and he could hear voices all around him, rising in panic. A sharp gasp cut through the crowd. "Get an ambulance," someone shouted. But the voices were muffled in Jordan's ears, his head spinning. He could feel the warmth of the pavement beneath him, the cool breeze against his skin, but it all felt distant. as if he was no longer fully in the world he had once known. Jordan's mind was foggy. He could hear footsteps approaching, quick and purposeful. And then, through the haze, he saw a figure. A tall man, walking toward him with an air of quiet confidence. Elon Musk. The crowd had parted as Elon made his way to Jordan's side, but it wasn't the usual cold gaze of a billionaire that Jordan expected. It wasn't the look of superiority, of someone who saw themselves as above everyone else. No, what Jordan saw in Elon's eyes was something completely different. Compassion. For a moment, it felt like time had slowed. Elon stood over Jordan, his gaze never leaving him. The people around them were still frantic, but Elon remained calm, his expression unreadable but not unkind. Jordan blinked up at him, confused. I'm sorry, he tried to say, his voice weak and hoarse. He wasn't sure why, but he felt embarrassed. It was one thing to collapse in front of strangers, but this was Elon Musk. The man who had revolutionized industries, the man who had changed the course of history. And Jordan, a simple delivery boy, was lying on the ground in front of him, completely useless. But Elon didn't look down on him. Instead, he knelt beside him, his eyes softening. "I think you've been working too hard," Elon said, his voice steady and calm. The words were simple, but there was a sincerity to them that caught Jordan off guard. Jordan struggled to sit up, but his body refused to cooperate. His arms shook as he pushed against the ground, but it felt as if all his strength had drained from him. And yet, Elon was still there, watching him, waiting. "I'll be fine," Jordan muttered, still feeling weak. He didn't want to look weak in front of Elon. He didn't want to seem pathetic. But Elon only shook his head, his expression still warm. "Don't push yourself," Elon said. "Rest for a moment." Jordan looked up at Elon, trying to focus. There was something about the way Elon spoke to him, something that made him feel like he mattered. It wasn't the usual dismissive attitude he was used to from the people in power. It wasn't the way Greg Thompson had treated him, as if he was nothing more than an obstacle in the way of progress. No, Elon Musk was different. As Jordan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. Here he was, lying on the ground in front of one of the most powerful men in the world, and yet, for the first time in his life, he felt seen. He wasn't just a delivery boy anymore. He wasn't just invisible. And that was when it happened. The shift. As Jordan continued to breathe, slowly gathering himself, he noticed something strange. The crowd that had gathered around them wasn't just standing by, watching. No, they were whispering. And not just whispering in concern for his well-being. They were whispering about him. "Did you see that?" one person muttered. "He just collapsed in front of Elon Musk. How does that even happen?" "I've heard of that delivery boy," another voice whispered. "He's always around. Always working. Always invisible. But today's different." Jordan's head was spinning. It was as if he was hearing the world for the first time. People were talking about him, but not in the way he was used to. This time, it was different. There was no scorn. There was no judgment. There was only curiosity. Respect, even. And that's when he realized something. It wasn't about his job. It wasn't about the deliveries he made or the small tasks he carried out. It was about something deeper. Something much bigger than just him. Elon stood over him, still calm and collected, as the crowd watched in silence. He could feel the shift in the air, the energy that had changed the moment Jordan collapsed. This wasn't just a moment of weakness for Jordan. This was the beginning of something much greater. Something that would shake the foundations of everything he had known. "You've been working in the shadows for too long," Elon said, his voice quiet but firm. "But you're not invisible anymore." The world is watching now. Jordan blinked, struggling to process his words. Was Elon talking about him? Was he talking about the way people treated him, the way he had always been overlooked? What do you mean? Jordan managed to ask, his voice still shaky. Elon paused, as if considering his response. And then, with a faint smile, he spoke again. You're more than just a delivery boy, Jordan, he said, his voice low and clear. You've been watching, observing, seeing things that others can't or won't see. You understand the system better than most. And you have the power to change it? Jordan's heart skipped a beat. The words hit him like a wave, crashing over him, filling him with an overwhelming sense of possibility. For the first time, Jordan felt a glimmer of something he had never allowed himself to feel before. Hope. It wasn't just the delivery job anymore. It wasn't about being invisible. It wasn't about being stuck in a system that treated him as if he didn't matter. No, it was bigger than that. It was about the world. The way it worked. The way it could be changed. Elon's gaze never wavered as he looked down at Jordan. You've been living in the background, working hard for those who don't see you. But I see you. And I think it's time the world did, too. Jordan felt a surge of something he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just adrenaline. It wasn't just excitement. It was a recognition of who he could become. And in that moment, something inside him clicked. The years of feeling overlooked, dismissed, and ignored began to fade. The anger that had simmered inside him began to shift into determination. Jordan knew now that he wasn't just a delivery boy. He wasn't just someone who was invisible. He was someone who had the power to make the world see him. But it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone who had been left in the shadows. It was about everyone who had been ignored, overlooked, and forgotten. And Jordan knew that he had a choice. The ambulance rushed Jordan to the hospital with blaring sirens, its bright red lights flashing against the fading light of the day. His mind was still foggy, but the words Elon Musk had spoken to him kept playing in his head. They echoed, louder with each passing moment, "You're more than just a delivery boy. The world is watching now." He couldn't fully grasp what that meant, but somehow, those words gave him a sense of power he had never felt before. They felt like a promise. A promise that something bigger was about to happen. But for now, all he could do was let the doctors take care of him, trying to catch his breath as the world swirled around him. The next morning, as Jordan lay in a hospital bed, still recovering from the collapse, his phone buzzed. He had left it on the bedside table, his hands too weak to hold it the night before. But now, with a bit more strength, he reached for it, blinking as he saw a strange number on the screen. He answered hesitantly. "Hello." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and somehow familiar. It sounded like someone from a corporate office, but Jordan couldn't place it. "Mr. Hayes," the voice asked. "This is Karen from Elon Musk's team. I'm calling because we'd like to offer you something." Jordan sat up straighter in his bed. His mind raced. This can't be real. It must be some mistake. He had no idea what to expect. But as the voice continued, he realized this was no mistake. "Elon saw something in you," Karen continued. "He wants to discuss an opportunity. Something that could change your life. Could you come in for a meeting later this week?" Jordan felt his heart begin to race. Opportunity? What kind of opportunity? Was this some kind of prank? Or was this really happening? He had never expected anything like this, not in a million years. "Of course," he replied, his voice trembling. "I'll be there." Later that week, Jordan found himself walking into a sleek, modern office building in the heart of Silicon Valley. He had never seen anything like it before. The building itself seemed to stretch toward the sky, with glass windows reflecting the clear blue sky and the crisp white clouds. It felt like a place where the most important decisions were made, decisions that shaped the future. He felt small in this world of giants, but for the first time in his life, he didn't feel invisible. There was something different about this moment. Something told him that this meeting would change everything. He had no idea how, but he was ready to find out. As he stepped inside, he was greeted by a friendly receptionist who led him through a corridor lined with sleek, polished walls. The atmosphere was quiet, but there was an energy here, a sense of purpose in the air that Jordan could feel, deep in his bones. The receptionist opened a door for him, revealing a large conference room with a long glass table. At the head of the table sat none other than Elon Musk himself. He was dressed in a simple black t-shirt and jeans, looking casual yet somehow powerful. His presence filled the room, and Jordan couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was the man who had revolutionized the world, who had built companies like Tesla and SpaceX from the ground up. The man who was reshaping the future. But today, Elon wasn't just the tech mogul. Today, he was the man who had noticed Jordan. Who had seen something in him when no one else had. And that realization hit Jordan with full force. Elon smiled when he saw Jordan walk in. "Glad you could make it, Jordan," he said, his voice warm and welcoming. There was no hint of arrogance or superiority, just a genuine interest. "Please, take a seat." Jordan took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. He walked to the table and sat down, his heart racing in his chest. He had no idea what this meeting was about, but one thing was certain: his life was about to change forever. Elon leaned forward, his eyes focused on Jordan. "I know this might be a bit overwhelming," he said. "But I've been watching you, Jordan. I've seen how hard you work. How you've managed to keep your head down and keep pushing, even when the world overlooks you. But what most people don't understand is that those who are overlooked, those who don't get the credit they deserve, are often the ones who see the truth. They see things others don't." Jordan was speechless. His mind was still racing from the previous day's events, and now, here he was, sitting in front of Elon Musk, listening to him speak about things he had never considered. "I've been seen," Jordan thought. "I've been heard." Elon continued, his voice steady and sure. "The world needs more people who are willing to speak up. People who aren't afraid to challenge the system, to make real change. And I believe you could be one of those people, Jordan." Jordan blinked, trying to process his words. Was Elon Musk really talking about him? The delivery boy who had always been invisible? The same man who had collapsed in front of him just days before? "Why me?" Jordan asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm just a delivery guy. I don't have anything special." Elon smiled. "That's where you're wrong. The fact that you've been overlooked, dismissed, is exactly why I think you have what it takes. You understand what most people don't. You've been living in the background, watching the world unfold from the outside. And now, it's time for you to be a part of it. I want to give you an opportunity, a chance to prove that someone like you can rise above, make a real impact, and change the way things are done." Jordan felt his heart race. This wasn't just a chance to work for Elon Musk, this was a chance to prove that someone who had been invisible, someone who had been overlooked, could rise to the top and make a difference. "I'm offering you a role in one of my companies," Elon said, leaning back in his chair. "Not just as an employee, but as someone who will be a key player. I want you to help us build the future. To challenge the status quo. To make a real difference." Jordan couldn't believe what he was hearing. This wasn't just a job offer. This was a chance to change everything. His heart was pounding in his chest, his thoughts racing. But then, a part of him hesitated. What if I'm not ready for this? What if I fail? He had always been invisible. Always the one who worked in the background, never the one in the spotlight. Could he really step up and take on such a big responsibility? Elon seemed to sense his hesitation. He leaned forward again, his gaze intense but kind. Jordan, I've seen the potential in you. I believe in you. But it's up to you whether you want to take this step. To step into the future and leave behind everything you thought you knew. Jordan took a deep breath, his mind made up. He wasn't going to let fear hold him back. This was his moment. He had been invisible for far too long, and now it was time for him to make a change, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked. I'm in, Jordan said, his voice steady. I'll do it. Elon smiled again, and for the first time, Jordan felt like he wasn't just a delivery boy anymore. He was someone with a future. A future that was full of possibilities. In the following weeks, things began to change. Jordan's life took on a new rhythm. He was no longer the invisible man on the street, delivering packages and blending into the background. He was now a part of something bigger. He was part of Elon Musk's world. But it wasn't just about Jordan's new role. It was about what he was going to do with this opportunity. The world had given him a chance, and now, it was his time to prove that even the most ordinary people could rise to greatness. And as the days passed, Jordan knew one thing for sure, he was no longer invisible. He was ready to change the world. Jordan Hayes wasn't just a success story. No, what he became was something far more powerful than just another tale of a man who made it big. He became a symbol. A living, breathing reminder that no matter how invisible someone feels, no matter how small they may seem in the grand scheme of things, every person has the potential to make a difference. His story wasn't just about hard work or a lucky break. It was about something deeper, about how the world often overlooks the quietest voices. The people who work in the background, the ones who don't seek the spotlight, who blend into the crowd. The people like Jordan, who wake up every day and do their jobs without anyone noticing. And yet, it's these people, in their silence, who hold a power that no one expects. They carry strength in their resilience, wisdom in their patience, and fire in their hearts. The world doesn't see them coming until it does. Jordan's story was the kind of story that proved that the world can change in a heartbeat. It showed that, sometimes, the biggest breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places. From the least likely people. From the quiet ones. The ones who are dismissed, underestimated, and ignored. Because, in truth, every person has a story waiting to be told. Every person has something they're capable of achieving if only someone would listen. And that's exactly what happened with Jordan. After years of being overlooked, after years of being the invisible delivery boy, he was seen. And not just seen by a stranger, but seen by one of the most powerful men in the world, someone who saw the spark in him when others were too busy to notice. Elon Musk didn't just offer Jordan a job. He gave him something much bigger, a chance to prove that even the most ordinary person can change the world. That even someone like Jordan, someone who had been overlooked for so long, could rise to greatness. It wasn't an easy journey. Jordan had to push through doubt, fear, and uncertainty. He had to face his own insecurities, wondering if he was truly capable of stepping into a world that seemed so far beyond him. But the more he believed in himself, the more others believed in him, too. He didn't just prove his worth, he proved that no one should ever be underestimated. Jordan's success wasn't just about his professional achievements. It was about something deeper. It was about the power of resilience, the strength that comes from never giving up, even when the world seems determined to make you disappear. Jordan's journey was proof that success isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes, it's quiet. Sometimes, it's about holding onto your dreams when everyone else is telling you to let them go. So, what can we learn from Jordan Hayes? Perhaps the most important lesson is this: never underestimate someone. Never think that the quietest person in the room doesn't have something to offer. It's the ones who work quietly behind the scenes who often have the most to teach us. And when the world doesn't see them, it's only a matter of time before the world will. Because, as Jordan proved, sometimes it's the ones who are overlooked who have the greatest power to change everything. Jordan's story became more than just a success in Silicon Valley, it became a reminder to us all. A reminder that the world is full of people who are capable of greatness. We just have to look a little closer. We just have to see them for who they really are, not by what they wear, or where they work, or how much money they make, but by the fire in their hearts, the dreams they hold, and the work they do quietly in the background. So the next time you see someone you might overlook, someone who seems insignificant in the grand scheme of things, remember Jordan Hayes. Remember the delivery boy who collapsed in front of Elon Musk. Because sometimes, it's in the most unexpected moments that the most incredible stories unfold. Sometimes, the greatest breakthroughs come from the quietest voices. And sometimes, it takes just one moment, one chance, for everything to change. In the end, Jordan Hayes taught us one powerful truth: we are all capable of greatness, no matter where we start. No matter how invisible we feel. And sometimes, the most incredible stories begin when you least expect them. When you keep pushing, keep dreaming, and keep believing no matter who notices. Because sometimes, it only takes one person to believe in you to make the world see what you're truly capable of. And maybe, just maybe, that person is you.